All right, partner, this is our second YouTube for Inside the Truck. We did one talking about Howie Meeker after he passed away, and today we're going to talk about the Masters tournament, which just finished last weekend. But before we start, this
Hmm.
is really important that I show you what I'm drinking my coffee out of. Ooh, look at that coffee koozie. Isn't that gorgeous?
Wow. I had no idea you were a Syracuse Orangeman fan, Steve.
Oilers S for Steve. And this was made
Wow.
for me. Well, see if you can guess who crocheted this for me.
Your grandma?
No. And if you say great grandma next, you're in big trouble. I'll tell you who crocheted it. 1991 Miss Grey Cup, the last ever
Wow.
Miss Grey Cup. That's
Wow.
right. At
Wow.
that time, she was Cheryl Gordon, and she crocheted this for me. So thank you, Cheryl. I'm going to enjoy my coffee today out of this. So when we talk about the Masters,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to take a sip.
Yeah. Enjoy that.
Mm, it's
Mm.
better with the koozie.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about the Masters,
Mm-hmm.
did you know it was the 65th year that CBS had covered that tournament? I had no idea that had been on CBS for 65 years.
I didn't know that it was that long. I knew that it was over 40 because the producer, Lance Barrow, who was in the big chair on the weekend, that was his 24th Masters. However, he started with CBS Sports as a spotter for Pat Summerall back in 1976. So that made it like 44 for him. So I knew it was at least 44.
Yeah, it's amazing that they've done it that long and they've got it down to a fine art, but it's not all CBS production decisions. And I think that's really tough. That's a really tough tightrope. Masters has a the Masters tournament has a really tight rein on that production. There's a minimal commercial interruptions per hour. That's intentional to set them apart from other golf tournaments, even the US Open and the PGA Championship and the Open Championship, which lay people call the British Open, but we're not calling it that. The Open Championship. CBS really takes a lot of its marching orders from Augusta on this broadcast.
Yeah, they do. It's the old, it's my ball, my game, my rules, right? If you want to play in my house, you're playing by my rules. And it's pretty evident that the TV coverage is controlled by Augusta. And hopefully we'll get into a little bit later on in this chat that it leads to some pretty awful TV, in my opinion.
That's a good teaser. I think one thing they did different that obviously we'd never seen before, and because there were no patrons, don't call them spectators or fans, there were no
Mm.
patrons there, so they could run drones all over the place. And I thought the drones were really cool. Just a perfect safe shot for them to go to whenever they had nothing to go to, like a blimp, I suppose, only a little lower. And they even got more adventurous. I noticed on Sunday, they even did a tracking shot from 16 green along the trees on the left side, on the opposite side of the water from the green down towards the tee. They got a little bit creative there. I can't see it being a sustainable model for tournaments with spectators, but I thought it was pretty cool at Augusta this weekend.
Yeah, for me, that was the shiny new toy. That was the thing that got most of my attention, and obviously, from a director's standpoint, I was quite interested to see how they use that. Um, they adopted a walk before they run philosophy with them, and I'm not sure if earlier in the week they didn't get a lot of time of rehearsal with the drones just because of the weather conditions at
Right.
Augusta earlier in the week. But certainly Thursday through Sunday, in my opinion, they hit a home run with them. I mean, some of the passes through the trees, and the passes around Founders Circle, gave us pictures of Augusta that we had never seen before. And for me, that was one of the most exciting pieces of the coverage.
It was pretty cool, all right. I liked it. I thought sometimes it got a bit overplayed, but like you said, when you have a shiny new toy, you're
Hmm.
not always what's the word, judicious about how often you play with it. So, uh,
Yeah,
yeah, it got played a bit, right?
yeah, and the other thing too, there was some RF breakup, but I felt that for the minimal times that it happened, the risk was well worth the reward in terms of the images that they got. I mean, the pictures from the drones, well, all weekend from every camera. I mean, we'd never seen Augusta like that, right? We're normally used to seeing it in the spring, when it's all kind of green and pastel colors. We saw earth tones. We saw browns and greens, really. The Georgia pines, the fairways and the greens for me, they really popped off the TV, and that was exciting to see that too for the first time.
Now, what about audio? No patrons. So I don't know about you, but I thought we would probably hear a little bit more, maybe some profanity, but I thought we'd hear a little bit more from caddies and players and that kind of thing. And I'm also wondering, because we didn't hear a ton, we heard some that I can allude to, but I'm wondering again if the Masters Committee stepped in and said, look, we're not going to ride that horse too hard
Mhm.
because we don't want to get a ton of profanity in our air.
I think that's probably part of it. The other thing I think is part of it too is just is also CBS's relationship and their respect for the golfers as well. I did feel though that that there was a bit of a miss with live microphones for me. I thought, this chance with no patrons, you could really get a lot of player to player, player to caddy, those fairway walks where you just hear, the caddy and the player talking and the clinking of the clubs. And if that meant getting to tee boxes a little bit earlier or staying on that handheld coverage and maybe covering a walk from green to tee box, I was kind of hoping that we got a little bit more of that and a little bit less of, here's his second shot on the par four. So for me, I set my expectations level high thinking, wow, there's no patrons. They can work their magic with audio. But for me, there wasn't really enough of that. I wish there was more.
I didn't hate it. I remember a couple jump out at me now that we're sitting here talking about it, and I think about it. One time, Rory had pulled his tee shot on 13 into the bush, kind of yanked it left over the creek, and they did a wonderful job of following him around in there, trying to figure out how to get out and what options he had. And I also remember Tiger on what would be the 12th hole on Sunday. Before he took the 10, as he was about to take the 10, he's over the ball on the tee, and you could hear his caddy Joe LaCava say, if you don't like it, meaning the wind, which Frank Nobilo explained, CBS broadcaster, if you don't like it, back off. And I thought that's not something you normally hear. It's something that caddies say all the time. Make sure you're 100% happy before you pull the trigger, and they all have different ways to say it to their player. I thought those were kind of cool. I enjoy that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's what makes it. I mean, if you've never been to a professional golf tournament, to be able to hear that stuff, it takes it to a different level. And I just thought that there would be more of that. You're right, there was moments. They had very good moments, but I guess to get in more of that stuff, that's a philosophy decision that production would have to make, meaning they'd have to give up golfers to spend time between tees or in a tee box and stuff, and that's a little bit different. Viewers wouldn't have expected that, but let's face it, this whole tournament was different, and this was their time to try that, and so I was just kind of hoping there'd be a little bit more.
I think you're right. You say that in a production meeting, right? Guys, to all your broadcasters, all your commentators, guys, we're going to have you lay out a bit and we're going to bring that sound up. But you're right. That never really kind of came through. Now, speaking of commentators, I think we have to address Vern Lundquist,
Mhm.
who's 80 years old, works the tower on 16. Vern did not have his A game at this tournament. Now, I'm not sure his A game still exists. And let's face it, he's not there for many other reasons other than his pipes and that he's done it for a long time. But Vern had some real struggles on Thursday and Friday, and you and I went back and forth with direct messages saying, "What's going on with Vern here?" My question is, how do you ease somebody like that out? Because you can't just, I don't think you can just say to him one day, "Oh, by the way, you know how you had next week penciled in your book to work the Masters? We're going to get you to stroke that out." You can't do that with somebody like Vern.
No, I mean, Vern has been and will always be a member of the CBS golf team. I mean, he has to be at every Masters moving forward until either he decides he doesn't want to be there or CBS is not covering it anymore. So what you do is you make the hard decision that he's not in the tower anymore on 16. But perhaps you give him another assignment, like you're going to voice over all our vignettes. Or you'll do leaderboards to break for us, or you'll be the voice of all our highlight packages, historic or current day kind of thing. And he still gets to be a part of it. The fans still get to hear his voice, which is synonymous with Masters coverage. But I think, I mean, let's face it, when you get Matt Weir instead of Mike Weir on the air, it's affecting your show. And at that point, I think you have to make the hard decision that the show has to go on. It has to continue to run at an A+ level. So let's get somebody in the tower on 16 that can keep it at an A+ level.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when Bob Cole was transitioning out on Hockey Night in Canada. And that's a really, because it's not just everybody else's decision. Bob, and I assume Vern, has a big hand in that decision too. And Vern, to me, on Thursday and Friday especially, just sounded like, you're pulling a lawnmower, but it won't start. Like he just couldn't hit the ground running. Every time he went to talk, it was like there was some gravel in there and it had to get out. And it can't be great for him either. And I'm sure he wouldn't want to hear it back. But those are really tough decisions to make at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody that wears a suit and tie and gets paid way more money than you and I are ultimately going to make that decision. But I think you have to be respectful of Vern, and I think you have to be respectful of the show, and therefore it's a tough decision. But I think you have to find a replacement.
Fair enough. What about the end? The putt goes. Dustin Johnson wins. The putt goes in the hole. Which first of all, I thought it was weird. He wasn't the last player to finish. He
That's
tapped
right.
in,
I
right?
hate that.
I
I
know, no,
know.
but normally golf etiquette says even
I
if you're
know.
that far from the cup,
I
you
know.
mark it.
I
So
know.
you're the last one to finish. So that's the first thing I thought is, what are you doing, man? Nobody, you got to be the last one to finish. But maybe they thought no patrons, doesn't matter. And then it didn't get weird at the end, but sometimes tournaments end that way. And I didn't like that. I don't know about you.
I didn't like it at all. As a matter of fact, for me, watching the Masters was like a 4-day movie, and then it comes right to the ending, right before the credits, and then it turns into the worst movie you've ever seen in your life, because that's what happened for me. I just felt that, first of all, I think it got off the rails when he didn't putt last,
Yeah.
because that was really weird. With all due respect to Sanjay M, I didn't need to see him, finish the tournament and walk off the
Mm-mm.
green. I thought that was where it got off the rails for me. And then the emotional moment with Austin and Dustin right before the
His
final
brother,
putt. Yeah, his
brother
brother,
and
his
caddy,
caddy.
Austin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That for me that was the money shot. Okay. And that was way more important than the putt, because there was no way DJ was going to miss the putt. What you didn't want to do was miss the moment of, basically it was DJ who was trying to, keep Austin in check, which was hilarious because Austin wasn't playing. It was DJ. Austin was losing had just lost it emotionally. I feel that CBS should have stayed with that coverage of the brothers Johnson and the emotion that was involved of a Georgia boy, or sorry, South Carolina boy just down the road from Georgia, winning his first Masters, a tournament that as a kid, he grew up dreaming about winning, and his brother, who, as anyone knows about golf, that your caddy is 50% of that win at least, right? He's his club selection, his psychologist, basically, he keeps him on the rails during the tournament, and Austin was, for me, was just as big a part of that win as DJ was, but we didn't see that in the coverage. Of course, it got blown up with a wife that stormed the green and then sort of took over the show. Sort of like when Miss Piggy would take over the Kermit show. That's kind of what I felt for that, and for me, that was disappointing. It was not a great ending to what was a remarkable 4 days of golf for Dustin Johnson.
So if you and I are sitting in the truck and I'm producing and you're directing, I probably say to you, don't miss the brother, don't miss the
Hmm.
brother, don't miss the caddy, right? And you
Hmm.
look at me and go, I got it, I got it. And
Hmm.
so we've discussed that as we're going along, that we think that's a potential as the tournament ends, right? Like these things don't come out of nowhere. We've
Hmm.
watched this couple work, Austin and Dustin, for
Hmm.
72 holes. So
Hmm.
we should have that in our mind that that's where we want to go, right?
Yeah, and then especially when Austin basically loses it on the 18th green before I mean, even well before Dustin even putt, like he was losing it, and the camera caught it, the greenside camera caught it, and it was such an emotional image, and I'm just like, in my mind, I'm like, go back, go back, go back, go back. That's what I want to see. Then the waters got muddied with Dustin putting and then having to wait for him, and then of course when when it was over, like I said, then at that point the scene was hijacked by somebody completely different. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a tandem producer director decision for sure. uh, I don't think Lance Barrow would have been all over Steve Milton if Steve had have gone that way, to stay, if but unfortunately, things happened in a millisecond, and and at that point it was off the rails, and there was no bringing it back.
And those moments only come once. And I'm sure you've cut things where you've looked back and said, what was I looking at there? I cut that completely opposite to the way I should have. And then I guarantee you there are other things you've cut where you went, I couldn't do that better if I had 100 tries at cutting that. And you never really know which bowl you're going to get served at that moment.
Yeah,
Right?
and exactly. And then, I mean, there's there's a relationship in the front bench of the truck between the producer, the director, and the technical director.
Yeah.
And you know, and so the director really relies on the TD. And if you take that shot of Austin, and as long as you're not going to miss the putt, obviously you don't miss that. But if the TD sees that moment and the director calls, to get off to set up the putt earlier, but you hang on that a little bit more as a TD, that's not wrong. And sometimes some great images happen from that. And so, yeah, it's a very unique, trusting three-way relationship in the front of the truck when those decisions are being made at that time. And they happen at warp speed. You just, buckle up and pray that you make the right one when you have to make it.
And you can plan and plan and plan and plan, and then he doesn't putt last, and it all just kind of goes in the air like a bunch of feathers. So the tournament finishes. They go to the Butler Cabin in what is always the most uncomfortable 5 minutes in sports television for me anyway. It is just the worst staged, hokey, phony, stilted, structured. It's god awful, right?
You know what it is, Steve? It's like being a wedding, getting invited to a wedding as a guest where you have no idea who the bride or the groom is. You just sit there all dressed up and shake your head and kind of try to soak in what's going on. And you have no emotion. You're not emotionally attached to it at all. And basically you're just watching a script play out, right? Which is what Butler Cabin is. And for me, the Butler Cabin has run its course. I mean, I think it's time to move on from that. That was awful TV. It always is. I think there's way better ways to handle that. I understand that Geppetto is behind the scenes. I get that. But at some point, you got to talk to Geppetto and tell them that they've got to lay off a little bit because it's awful TV.
Geppetto being the Masters committee. Okay, that's great. It sucked. What would you do? How would you change it?
Well, first of all, I would get it out of Butler Cabin because it's the most vanilla, sterile, non-atmospheric location that you can do it. I think even the fire is fake, right? So, so I would get it out to the green on 18, okay? And I would, first of all, with all due respect to the low amateur, congratulations on your achievement. But I think that interview is done with like Amanda Balionis. It can be greenside, or it can be in front of the players' locker room, or whatever. You can wrap that story separately because, with all due respect, he's not part of the show, really. I know that's clearly a Masters thing, because if it was CBS calling the shots, I don't think you'd include the low amateur.
But they invite a certain number of amateurs every year, including the U.S. Amateur Champion. So I think that's part of the Masters. That's part of the Masters tournament's mandate, that they treat these amateurs respectfully, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And give him his due respect. I mean, he got camera time. He got an interview earlier in the weekend, and he's going to get one in the closing sequence. But I don't think you do it. You don't include past champion, new champion, and with him on 18 green. So basically what happens is Jim Nantz is your host. He quarterbacks the whole thing. Leave TV to the professionals, okay? Because the one thing I can't handle is watching, an Augusta chairman interviewing players, because I mean, it's not his deal, really, So have Jim host it. Let the Augusta chairman speak for a couple of minutes, even. It can be Q&A, or it can just be a prepared kind of statement that he's got memorized, just wrapping his final thoughts on the week. And then he's done. And then Jim quietly, calls over the past champion with the blazer. Then it's like when Miss Universe, the old Miss Universe, is handing off the crown to the new Miss Universe. Then the past champion has a minute, whether that's Q&A or whether that's kind of a minute worth of thoughts that he wants to talk about. Then call over the new champion, again being quarterbacked by Jim Nantz. The jacket is presented, and then it's 2 or 3 questions from Jim to the new champion, and that's where you evoke the emotion. That's where we would have seen DJ break down. Instead, due to the hurried up off to NFL football, wherever they were going, we never even got that, right? Had to search for that later on Twitter. So that's where you see that, and then you go to rollout and copyright. So I mean, it's basically the same cast of characters minus the low amateur. But it's done in an area where there's going to be atmosphere, right? Even in a pandemic tournament, you're going to have caddies, past champions, friends, family, the people from Augusta. They'll all be there. At least you have some cutaways. You'll have applause and you'll have cutaways and stuff, right? I mean, you get none
There's
of
no
that.
cutaways in the
No,
Butler Cabin. Well, you could go to
no.
the tight shot of the picture of
Yeah,
Bobby Jones, the painting of
right,
Bobby Jones on the
right.
wall. That's
Or
a
you
hell of
could
a cutaway.
or you could go to the mouse in the corner that's peeking out, wondering when the food's going to be
The
available.
food's already
Yeah,
there. The mouse is
yeah,
already eating a
yeah,
sandwich, and it's a good one. It's pimento cheese, so it's a
right.
good sandwich. You know who does it well? To me, of all the majors, the Open Championship does it great because
Hmm.
they get them out on the green. They introduce the amateur. They hand the trophy to the winner, and then everybody shuts up. And the
Right.
winner can talk
Just
for
talk
5 minutes.
all
Yeah,
day.
right? Five
Right.
minutes. And inevitably, it's
Hmm.
talk, 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 cry, talk, talk,
Hmm.
talk, laugh, talk, 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 cry,
Hmm.
and then they're done. To me,
And
they do
yeah,
it the best. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I think it's time for the Masters to go to that. Again, CBS can't just like snap their fingers and change this because there's a lot of people, a lot of cooks in that kitchen. But I think it's awful TV, and it's a really crappy way to end 4 days of amazing television coverage and amazing golf.
Well, the good news is we get to watch it again in 147 days, 145 days. So we'll see if
Yeah,
they've changed it based on these recommendations, which I highly doubt. But you never
yeah.
know, Paul.
You
You
never know.
never know.
But what I want to say though is that the CBS Sports won the Emmy for their coverage of the Masters last year. Um, you know, it's the Tiger Show, and so I think, given the situation of pandemic 2020, they've got a really good chance at winning another Emmy for back to back on their coverage. Um, and also want to wish will have a new producer in the big chair when we see them again in April. His name is Sellers Shy. He's a veteran CBS sports producer, who's worked on many, many major events, but he's been sort of groomed for this position. Been Lance Barrow's right hand for the longest time. And so there'll be a new producer in the chair. So we wish Sellers all the best on that crowning achievement of his career when we see them all again at Augusta in April.
We do. Any other part of the broadcast we want to carve or give a pat on the back, or does that
Mm.
finishes it right there?
Yeah, no, no, I mean, we're being extremely nitpicky, right?
Yes and
Nobody,
no.
no,
Yes
yeah,
and no.
nobody does it like CBS Sports. So, again, congratulations to them. Just do me a favor and get rid of Butler Cabin, and I'll be happy. Other than that, I really have nothing bad to say about it.
Hey, other than that, that's it. Other than
That's
that,
it.
we loved it. That's
Yeah,
right. All right. Hope you enjoyed this, YouTube. Keep listening to our podcast, Inside the Truck. Next one coming up is all about the Grey Cup. Very cool. And thanks again for the koozie, Cheryl. And I'm going to enjoy my coffee. See
yeah.
you,
You know what?
partner. Oh,
Can you
yeah.
tell Cheryl that I would like one in red and white, base red, trim white with a big P on it. Could she do that?
Yeah, I can guess what the P. Oh, no, Paul. I got it. And will we just ignore the grandmother comment earlier then? Like, or you think that'll
I love
fly? Or
Cheryl. I think it's the best coffee koozie I've ever seen.
don't even try. He's Paul. I'm Steve. We'll see you next time.